It's such an incredibly liberating experience.
Obviously, different disciplines conduct research differently, and since there's so many different disciplines that are covered within this College Scholar program, it's easy to see that entire range.
I think that the ability to apply many disciplines, ideas, and ways of thinking about topics to your project is one of the most important parts of the College Scholar program for me. And so for students in similar situations, I would absolutely encourage them to apply as well.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week on Speaking of Language,
McKenna Norton and Jack Donnellan are undergraduates in the College Scholar program at Cornell. They describe the motivations and process behind their ambitious multidisciplinary undertakings.
Welcome to a new episode of Speaking of Language. I'm Angelica Kramer, the director of the Language Resource Center at Cornell University.
And I'm Sam Lupowitz, the LRC's media manager. Today, we have two undergraduate students in the studio with us. McKenna Norton and Jack Donnellan are members of the Class of 2025 cohort of the Robert S. Harrison College Scholar Program.
We will hear more about their projects that focus on responses to alienation across cultures and on the role of language in the application of the rule of law around the world. Welcome to Speaking of Language, McKenna and Jack.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Before we dive into the College Scholar program and your specific projects, please tell us a bit more about your background and your interest in different languages and cultures. Jack, maybe you could kick us off.
Sure. My name is Jack, as you've already said, but I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and so I study government here at Cornell.
Mm-hmm.
That major program doesn't require that many courses, and
Sure.
so I've kind of in addition to the College Scholar program, but I've tried to kind of figure out what ways since I was a freshman to, fill up the extra time, what classes to take.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess something that always interested me was taking language classes. And so
Nice.
I've done that since I came here. So I've taken actually 3 languages. So I've taken French, Hebrew, Arabic at different points.
Wow,
and
nice.
So I've, my goal is to try to get to the advanced level in those languages, but it's just been like a nice way to, fill out my time here at Cornell.
Yeah, and balance what you're doing here. That's awesome. We love it when students take all the languages.
McKenna, what about you?
Hi, my name is McKenna Norton. I'm a junior. In addition to the College Scholar program, I'm also studying Asian studies with a focus on China and Taiwan. My interest in languages began when I was younger, when my family moved to Shanghai, China, which jump-started both my interest in Sinophone cultures and also my study of Mandarin Chinese. Since then, I've also taken up Spanish, and so far, those are the only 2 languages I've committed to, but I'm very interested in learning more languages in the future.
Awesome. That's what we like to hear. So as we mentioned, both of you are part of the Robert S. Harrison College Scholar program here at Cornell, which represents the pinnacle of a liberal arts experience. The program welcomes a small group of stellar students each year whose interests transcend disciplinary boundaries. Students design their own interdisciplinary major, which is generally organized around a question or issue of interest, and then pursue a course of study that can't be found in an already established major. So college scholars also undertake an independent senior project, which usually culminates in an honors thesis that allows for engagement and learning in the classroom and beyond. So thinking about your 2 projects, what are they about? McKenna, why don't you get us started?
Fantastic. So, as mentioned earlier, the key question of my project is about alienation. Alienation is a complex term of sociology, but we can think about it as disconnection from something important. So somebody can be alienated from community, for example, or from the environment. I'm interested in how different case studies have responded to alienation. Essentially, I'm looking at situations where people live together in intentional communities like communes, eco-villages, monasteries, etc., and how these group living arrangements serve to reduce members' feelings of alienation with the goal of applying these techniques to future patterns of living essentially, my goal is to use the techniques these folks have already figured out and use them to help make everybody happier, healthier, and more connected to each other.
Fascinating.
Yeah,
Very
that's
cool.
yeah, that's amazing. And you said that potentially you might have plans to study abroad as well as part of this and using at some case studies. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, absolutely. So I spent this past summer in Taiwan in a monastery, which was incredibly illuminating for this project and also personally.
Yeah.
I hope to continue this goal of studying abroad in Taiwan, but also in some areas in Latin America and some areas around the United States with case studies of eco-villages, communes, monasteries, etc.
Tell us more about that time in a monastery.
I would love to. I would love to. It was an absolutely incredible experience. I spent the time volunteering there and also participating in chanting, meditation, etc. with the monastics. It was an incredible experience, and it's changed my view of how I study Buddhism, whereas previously I would have considered it strictly from an academic lens, very theoretical lens. I guess I'm learning more about the power of a very embodied academic experience, which challenges not only our ability to understand the very theoretical aspects of the religion, but also what it means to actually live it out in daily life. And studying the practice of the monastics was incredibly useful in this regard.
So coming from a language background, what was the day-to-day language that was used?
Oh, yes. So it was in Taiwan, so it was entirely Mandarin Chinese.
Okay.
It was challenging at first to learn Buddhist vocabulary, which is safe to say not what I was learning in a classroom setting.
Right.
But it worked out pretty well for me and was very interesting.
Interesting. Well, and I'm wondering, Jack, for your project, I guess in the field of government, that is vocabulary that's very different and separate too. Can you talk a little bit about your project and what you are doing?
Yeah, totally. So I guess I was coming to it from the government major
Of course,
perspective, right?
yeah.
And so I was interested in, I'd taken a law class in freshman year, and I was interested in the fact that just the law is written in such a way where if you like remove one word or add one word or interpret one word differently, or if two people, for example, interpret something differently, that can lead to an entirely different outcome for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the policy debates or the legal debates that, really we see on our news screens all the time or we read about happen because people interpret, these like very old texts differently. And so it kind of struck me there that there's like a question that goes beyond just like the law or the government or how, what the government should be doing today, but it has to do with just how people interpret text,
of course,
or how
yeah.
people, process text or what people want to take out of a text. And that made me ask this question, like, is there something like innate about like a text itself, or like, is there something like, oh, this is a law that's written in English, or this is a law that's written in French? Is there something about like the linguistic aspect of the text, or just something that's separate from government, separate from the law itself, that makes people process it or interpret it a certain way?
Yeah.
And I know that stretches beyond, I guess, the realm of government, but I think it's interesting to like think about different languages and maybe how maybe we interpret law, or maybe we interpret those language because of like our own cultural background,
Sure.
or our own kind of how we grew up. But maybe there's something beyond that. Maybe there's something about the language itself. And I think there's a distinction there that could be interesting to explore as I, go into senior year next year.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I'd love to know for both of you what prompted your interest in these topics, and who are you working with on campus, your faculty advisor and anyone else who might be contributing? Jack, why don't you kick us off for that?
So in terms of this particular project, I actually haven't, I've been speaking to people just around campus and talking to friends and family about it and just like bouncing ideas off of them, but I haven't, started writing a thesis about it or
Sure.
completing a project. And so that's definitely something for the future. Right now, I'm really focused on or interested in developing good research skills. So, we had to take this College Scholar seminar course last year that was really focused on getting us to think about how to like come up with our own research questions, engage in the research process, use different forms of software that help, I guess, researchers or help professors at Cornell,
Sure, yeah.
make out or produce publications. And so that was on Professor Goldstein, who's our director of the College Scholar Program. And then I've also gotten to do over the summer, I got to do some research in the sociology department with Professor Marlani, which was cool. And she runs this other project on Title IX, which is, again, unrelated, but I think right now I'm just interested in developing research skills and,
Sure.
and putting that towards, next year writing my own thesis.
Great.
And McKenna, how about you? What got you interested in alienation and everything else that goes into your project?
Absolutely. So the thing which prompted my interest in not only alienation but methods to resolve it, especially community-based methods, was an internship I did the summer after my freshman year with the Nexus program under Professor Jane Marie Law. This experience not only introduced me to the theoretical sociological concept of alienation, but also was a very hands-on project in teaching sustainability skills to a broader community without technical expertise in these matters. So it transformed the way I think about community building, sustainability, what a sustainable future could look like, and that really prompted my interest in this topic, especially in alienation and eco-villages. In terms of people I'm working with on campus, my advisor for this project is Jane Marie Law in the Asian Studies Department, but my thinking has also been deeply influenced by others, including Carolyn Fornoff in Latin American Studies, who researches ecofeminism, Arnica Furman in comparative literature and FGSS, and Nick Admison in the Asian Studies Department.
Oh, nice. That's a broad array of people who are involved. It's
Yes.
wonderful. Well, and it sounds like same for you, Jack, right? You're talking to lots of different people, getting input from lots of different perspectives. I think that's interesting. So what I would like to hear more about is what do you think your project will actually uncover? And I think you're maybe at different stages in your projects right now, but do you have a specific hunch of, if you can fast forward a year right now, looking at your honors thesis, what are your findings? McKenna, what do you think you will find?
Well, I guess something that's been transformative for me in the last couple of years, thinking about my project, is just a measure of intellectual humility. I suppose I started out my project with the idea that I would discover some, key way of undoing alienation that would resolve all of our problems, essentially. And as it turns out, alienation is a very complex topic. It's very hard to resolve it. And the topics or the techniques that have been used to resolve it are not the same in all times and spaces. So I suppose the way I see my project has transformed from finding some panacea which will solve all our problems to maybe uncovering how these specific folks have found ways to do it. And maybe leaving my project there, not trying to draw any excessively broad conclusions, just rather focusing on a more anthropological study of what are some ways one could, in theory, in specific cultural contexts, resolve alienation to some extent.
Yeah. Well, Jack, and I know this is a kind of tricky question, but what do you think you will uncover?
One of the things that I thought about is how to study this question of language and law and the relationship, because there's a lot of ways that you could go about it. There's like an empirical kind of path where you're, maybe you even were to conduct a small study with different language speakers. This was one of my ideas, like how could I, get a group of people that speak two languages or give them a couple of texts in two different languages and see, if you read X law or X text in language A versus language B, that there's some sort of interpretation that's different because language A is just different from language B.
Yeah.
I think that even if you went down that approach, if you went down a more kind of analytical approach where you're looking at, legal history, both times I have a hunch that that language, is to a great degree inseparable from like the culture that it embodies.
Absolutely.
And so I don't think that language is just like this static thing that, doesn't have any impact on how we perceive things. I think that, if you speak a certain language or, different languages have different cultural associations, words in different languages date back to, or tied to different religious traditions or,
Certainly, yeah.
and so I think that you can't escape that when you try to use language in something as, maybe as sterile or as non, or as supposedly universal as the law is. And so, I think that's just like an important thing to keep in mind as you, talk about law and policy and all of these things, that there's this kind of linguistic undertone, where language is tied to culture. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's fascinating. I can't wait to see what you guys actually do uncover in your write-up for your thesis in a little over a year. That's great.
Yeah. Why would you encourage other students to apply for the College Scholar Program?
I guess I would absolutely encourage students with interdisciplinary interests to apply to the College Scholar Program because it's such an incredibly liberating experience. For me, my interests span across 3 continents, 3 languages, and in terms of disciplines, I mean, I'm reaching into sociology, anthropology, religious studies, comparative literature, I mean, FGSS, and so much more. It's simply not possible for me to do my project in a way that I would find satisfying within, for example, the Asian Studies department alone or any other department alone.
Sure.
I think that the freedom which comes with being able to apply various disciplines' way of thinking about a topic to your project. I think that the ability to apply many disciplines' ideas and ways of thinking about topics to your project is one of the most important parts of the College Scholar Program for me. And so for students in similar situations, I would absolutely encourage them to apply as well.
And I'd just add on to that, actually, McKenna. I think there's a couple other things that I'd also add on. I think those are all excellent. Those are like the main points that you're hitting. One thing that stuck out to me is just the resources. I think at Cornell we've got a lot of different resources, like the Language Resource Center, but you have to go in and actually tap into those resources. So the College Scholar Program, if you're interested in research and the process of research and finding out something new or you have an idea that's like in your head, it's a great way to actually learn about how to conduct that research or get access to funds or resources or professors that know about the College Scholar Program that you can talk to. It's a great way to kickstart your research career in a way, like if you haven't done any research before. And so for me, I think something that's grown on me and that I'm really interested in is just this process of conducting research. And also how it varies across disciplines. So obviously different disciplines conduct research differently. And since there's so many different disciplines that are covered within this College Scholar Program, it's easy to see that entire range and then also obviously go in your specific direction at the end of the day.
And I'll also add as one more thing, the College Scholar Program is made up of folks in so many different disciplinary situations and working on so many different projects. I feel like the experience for me of being in a room with people working on science projects that I will never understand and all these kinds of different topics which I have no knowledge of, but all working towards a common goal of uniting different disciplines for to find new research, I think is very valuable because I don't have experience with many science folks. I know the science folks often don't get much exposure to humanities disciplines. So I think this kind of blending is also very helpful to form a really great intellectual community.
Absolutely. Yeah. Opens up new ways of thinking, new ways of seeing things and interpreting things. Texts, among many other things.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, if we have any rising sophomores out there who are currently listening, the application deadline is actually coming up for the next cohort on October 13th. So sharpen your pencils. It's an online application, so sharpen your Apple pencils.
Showing our age a little bit. We're not rising sophomores.
No, we are not. Definitely not. But get those applications in and join the College Scholar Program. So what else is in your future? Obviously, writing up your projects, but Jack, what do you think is up on the horizon for you? Maybe post-graduation from Cornell?
Oh, tough question. I know that I want to pursue higher education. I'm not sure if that means like law school or if that means a PhD, but I know that I feel like a spark has been lit, maybe
That's
from this program. But
Yeah.
I'm currently, really in the process of trying to figure out what that next step is. So, I mean, this semester you'll find me in CS, stats, and econ, just because, and they're a little bit different from, the gov classes that I've been taking before.
Sure.
But it's just because I'm trying to, figure out what kind of lights that spark. But I know it's there, so just have to figure out what it is.
Well, and you have time. And also figuring out what you don't like, right? I think
That's true,
that's
yeah.
a very important piece of the puzzle, too. McKenna, what about you?
Same as you, Jack. I'm thinking about higher education. For me, this will probably look like pursuing a PhD and likely a postdoc. At this point, I'm thinking about going into academia as a career, as I've really, like Jack, fallen in love with the research aspect of it and the kind of intellectual freedom that this enables.
That's awesome.
Yeah. This has been really interesting, really beautiful to hear about what you're researching and everything on the horizon. So thank you for sharing that with us. But before we sign off, we'd like to ask each of you to share a word in a language you speak, love, are learning, want to learn that doesn't exist in English, but you wish it did. Let's hear those words. McKenna, maybe you can start.
Yes, so the word I'm thinking of is 刀子嘴豆腐心. It's a word in Mandarin Chinese. Essentially, it directly translates to knife, mouth, tofu, heart. And it means somebody who has a very sharp tongue, but it has a soft heart inside.
Oh.
I love the tactileness of it. I love how physical it is.
Yeah,
I love the
visual.
contrast. Yeah, I love everything about it. I think it's a very good word.
That describes some of my favorite people. I love that. Also, the translation sounds like a neutral milk hotel. I think that might also be showing my age. But anyway, Jack, what about you?
It's okay. I also listen to the Neutral Milk Hotel. So,
Okay, great.
yeah. This is a easier word, but in Arabic and Hebrew, there's this word called yalla, which is like let's go. Like it's a nice little little word to add at the end of something. So or at the beginning of something, but to kick you off or whatever. So yeah, I thought that would be a fun word to share.
Well, and I think you can hear it in it. There's a spring in your step in that word, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very much so.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for speaking of language with us today, McKenna and Jack.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Tune in next week to hear from Simon Zuberik about corpora data and their applications in the language classroom. Until then,
Auf Wiederhören.
The Language Resource Center is located on the ground floor of Stimson Hall on Cornell's main campus in Ithaca, New York. Check us out on the web at lrc.cornell.edu.
or follow Cornell LRC on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Speaking of Language is produced by Angelica Kramer and Sam Lupowitz.
Recorded by Sam Lupowitz.
Original music by Sam Lupowitz, Dan Gable, and Joe Gibson.
Thanks also to the College of Arts and Sciences at Cornell University.
As a reminder, the ideas and opinions expressed on this podcast do not reflect those of the College of Arts and Sciences or any other official entity of Cornell University.
We thank our listeners, and do stay tuned for our next episode.